Did you know the Olympia Food Co-op is largely run by volunteers? Over 300 volunteers keep the cash registers ringing, the cheese packaged, and the produce stocked. When you volunteer at the co-op, you join a community of volunteers, staff, and members, learn about the inside workings of the store, and get a 25% discount on your groceries. Sign up for a volunteer introduction tour at either store to get started, or ask a staff member for more information. The Olympia Food Co-op is a community-owned, nonprofit food store. More information is available at olympiafood.coop.
And you're listening to Chaos Radio 89.3 FM here in Olympia. And we're at the Evergreen State College campus, and I'm here tonight with Ed Johnstone. And well, first I'll let you know what you heard. That was a victory song, Paddle to Quinault, and off the Paddle Quinault disc and label, Paddle to Quinault. And so I want to thank G-Dub for sharing that with us and get that out there, and it's a beautiful thing. And we're going to talk a little bit tonight about treaties at risk, but first I'm going to let Ed introduce himself, and we're going to talk a little bit about, well, I've been talking about the first hour, Protect the Sacred, but we're going to, here you go, Ed. Sorry.
Thanks. I didn't do any mic work, but, you know, I just spent the last 4 or 5 hours at Point Granville, which is where we hosted the paddle last year, and much different today. Real peaceful, real quiet. Got to watch the eagles soar and to listen to the ocean. And I was thinking about when I came up, you know, what our subject, you know, we're going to talk about treaty rights at risk, for instance, is a subject we brought up 3 years ago, July, to the White House. Billy Frank and I and our executive director from the Northwest Indian Fish Commission, and really was talking about, started with talking about salmon and the Puget Sound and the agreements that the treaty tribes have put together with themselves, the state of Washington, and National Marine Fisheries Service, because of the listed species and the take provisions. And it says some things that we're going to do, and we're going to return the salmon. And as Billy would point out, we're not rebuilding the salmon. We're on a downward slide, and that's why we started that mission. And the story is that we're destroying the habitat faster than we can. I mean, we're destroying it faster than we can restore it. We're being outpaced, and so out on the coast, we're not Puget Sound. We have some healthy. All our salmon stocks are pretty healthy, and but we're not exempt from the impact of, I guess, westernization, colonization, commercialization. Big oil has taken its bullseye and is looking at Grace Harbor to be an exit point. It's not really an exit point. This oil that's being fracked in North Dakota, South Dakota, eastern Montana, and other places, it needs to have a place to be refined, because it has to have primary manufacturing before it can be exported, if in fact that's what they're going to do. But they got to get it to refineries, and it's going everywhere. And it's going over rail. It's going over rails that are wore out. It's going in these old 50s, 60-year technology cars. They're 111 cars. They're not meant to carry this kind of crude. This crude is real volatile. They have to mix chemicals in it to stabilize it, to move it. And there was a derailment almost a year ago, and I'm probably going to not do justice to the French words, but it's in Quebec. Honor lac imaginatique. And we're going to do this, to honor these folks, on July 6th in Aberdeen. And 47 people died that day when this crude by rail went through their town. And so we will honor them like many towns across America and in Canada will at this same time, the 47 people that perished. And this is part of our concern about the idea, the concept, and the delivery of this crude into Grace Harbor. This crude is already going to East Coast locations. That's why it was heading across East Canada. It's going into California. I think it's Martinez up out of San Francisco Bay, and they want to bring some of it into Grace Harbor, into tank farms, from tank farms into ships and barges, and then over to either Anacortes or I believe Cherry Point, and then down to Martinez, California. It already goes in by rail to Anacortes, but there's not enough capacity on those rails as it goes into Grace Harbor. So the Quinault Indian Nation, along with other organizations and citizens, will be talking about this crude by rail, and we're going to do a little bit of a memorial service to those that have lost their lives as this crude by rail went through their community. And what we're saying, the Quinault Indian Nation, as it joins with others, our main concern is our treaty rights are at risk with this crude by rail. We're standing side by side with the Dungeness crabbers. We're standing side by side with people in the tourism industry. We're side by side with folks that hold dear the environment, the folks that enjoy the birds in the Bowerman Basin, national bird. I don't know if they call it a sanctuary. Many different walks of life will be with us in Zelasco Park on July 6th, and this is our latest, I guess, battle that we are experience, the Quinault Indian Nation on the coast, with our treaty rights at risk.
Yeah, it's just reading the press release, remembering the 47, honoring the earth, and it also I know that you talked a little bit about in the beginning how everything's affecting even you on the coast, and I have Uncle Billy in my head always talking about how they're gonna come, and they're not gonna know anything about us, and we have to continue to educate and to continue to tell the truth and work together. And so I hear and also one of the things that the honoring Native people have always honored the environment, everyone, and to remember the 47, honoring the earth, and we're in this time now where we really have to protect everything. We've always had to protect everything, but like you said, it's going faster than we can restore it or protect it.
Yeah, it's really disturbing to see the kind of the mindset behind the opportunity as they see these back in oil fields as an opportunity. It has about a 25-year lifespan. And if you spend a little time looking at the process of fracking this oil and what it does to the environment where that's happening, and they're just really, people in those areas are waking up to exactly what's going on and how they're going to end up dealing with it when these guys move out of town. And that's part of what we look at is, in the name of supposedly in the name of creation of jobs in the highest unemployment in the state, in Grace Harbor County. True, there will be some jobs, but it's not the number of jobs that they're trying to put out there as a sustainable number. There'll be short-term numbers, and they might be significant upon some build-out, but then really the actuality of how those things operate, tank farms, as 2 different engineers testified at a scoping hearing for EIS State of Washington, Department of Ecology, Hoquiam High School. 2 gentlemen, one came out of Thurston County, one came out of Pierce County, both engineers, both ran tank farms. They said it's not if you have a spill, it's when you have a spill. And it's not if you have a fire, it's when you have a fire. One of them they said that he ran a tank farm in the South Pacific Ocean. And he made a comment that there's not enough fire suppression equipment in Washington State or in Oregon to put out one fire, and that this crude is different. It sinks to the bottom, and you can't use oil booms to contain it, for instance. And then one thing that was pretty telling to us in the audience, I believe, was he said, "You know why there are not many people working in tank farms? Because of human error. You take the human element out of it, you have less risk." So these things say to us, do the analysis of the risk versus the reward, and we don't see the reward. We see that big oil companies will get a reward, those that ship and carry will get a reward, and those that pack it off in their ships and barges will get a reward. We won't be rewarded. We'll be left like every other industry when they leave town, like when Weyerhaeuser leaves town and leaves entire communities with buildings and lands and properties and mills and no work.
Right. And leaves the tribes for cleanup. I can tell you, I grew up in upstate New York, and I'm not going to mention the plant that's in Canada, but it was dumping into the water there in the St. Lawrence, and it was the Akwesasne people that cleaned it up. I mean, you can't get it all. I mean, there's still traces of mercury there, but they were the ones that cleaned it up, and not the companies that were there. And so I know that, and I know that what you're talking about when I think it's a short-term goal that they have. They're not looking 7 generations down with the environment and what it can do. And I don't like what you said, but I know it's true. An accident will happen. It's not when it will. I mean,
Yes.
You can't. I mean, they don't talk about it anymore, but they still haven't capped the oil thing down in the Gulf. I mean, it's still leaking into the ocean.
And you look at, and it's the other type of crude. You look at, off of Bligh Reef in Prince William Sound. You go up there and turn the rocks over, and guess what's still laying there? Oil.
Yeah.
25 years later. So, I mean, this is what the oyster growers talk about when they testified. This is what the salmon fishermen when they testified. This is, these are the people on the water and on the shore testified to that when you look at potential impacts, you have to, this is how large the scope is. In the 3 or 4 public hearings they had, Aberdeen, I believe, Elma, Centralia, Chehalis, almost 23,000 comments. And they got a big task ahead of them, because some of them do not follow the guidelines that they say you stick to for scoping purposes. A lot of it's going to be opinion about whether we want this to come through or not, and I don't think there were any that said, yeah, we think this is a good idea. I mean, this is galvanizing people. There's a recent resolution passed by the city of Vancouver, Washington, who was potentially being looked at as a place that they can load this onto ships and barges and send it off for refinement. It looks like they're saying, if we can't be certain about safety, we don't want it. And there's lots of tags that go along with safety. bringing it here, transferring into a tank, transferring back into a ship or barge, going out. The second most challenging or roughest bar on the West Coast, Grace Harbor Bar. 12 months of the year, it's not a good idea. These trains are somewhere between a mile and a quarter and a mile and a half long, already cutting towns off one side to the other for 20-30 minutes times, I think it's something the magnitude of 5 to 7 times more than the train traffic that's happening now. So this is a big issue for the Quinault tribe and Grace Harbor, big time.
Then how many trips a day are they claiming also?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I think about when you do the math. I believe it gets to be 7 or 8 trains a day. And we already know that the products they come in and do a good job with, like soybeans, those trains are in that 100-car range, and when they come down the bluff and go right by Walmart to go over the first bridge into downtown Aberdeen, it's sometimes 20 minutes. At the same time, if you lived in Alma, it would be cutting you off from South Alma from North Alma for same kinds of time. So now that do that 7 or 8 times a day, now you got 4 or 5 hours of traffic that is not going to let you access one side or the other. On rails that are old and wore out, this past summer, shortly after we started looking at this question, 3 derailments in Aberdeen where cars were going somewhere between 0 and 5 miles an hour, left the tracks and fell over and spilled soybeans. Mm-hmm. And so you look at this place in Quebec, when those cars derailed, they have a real volatile crude in it that they call it a flash point. They explode, mm-hmm. and they have a pretty wide area of flash. And they'll literally incinerate whatever's around there, and that's not made up. That's real. I mean that's a happening that did happen. It's there as an example. All you got to do is look at it.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm now taking statistics in my class, and all the things that you just said, and I'm trying to do the scenario in my head. It's just not good.
No.
Any way you look at it, it's just not good. It's not good for the people. It's not good for the environment. And, without the environment, none of us can live. And we have to make better decisions on what we're doing and stop allowing these types of companies coming in. Because like you said, they're just going to come in, do all the damage and leave. And the citizens and the tribes, and I'm going to say mostly the tribes, will clean it up because that's the way it's always been. Mm-hmm. I remember when our last talk, we talked about how you were saying that, the tribes have always put the environment first, and how they're always going to clean, they're always going to come up with ways to do that, where the state always says that we don't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
But
broke.
Yeah, but without the environment, we have to, we can't live. None of us. I mean, we're pulling things out of I know that Billy called them dead zones, and tons of fish and that are 3-headed or whatever. You just can't eat them, And I know that they're having a problem with the elk, and because of the environment. So how can we?
Well, I mean, that's one of those big questions that's out there when you take a look at the issue of climate or climate change, and it's been a decade or two of denial, and probably as I said before, maybe the last time I was here for Quinault. The debate's over. I mean, when we looked at Anderson Glacier and a couple other glaciers that are very close together, that are the headwaters of the Quinault River, and only by the fact that we have a staffer that paid attention and looked at photos in the early 1920s, and he's like a 40-year employee with us, and he was hiking up there when he first joined us and took a picture, and he was going back every 10 years or so, and he kept right in the same spot. He was taking a picture of Anderson Glacier. In his own career with us, he looked at it and he went, "Where'd the glacier go?" So like a 1920 or 23 photo, he's standing in one spot and the glacier's like not far from him. And then 30 years later he found a photo, and then 20 years later, and then his first photo, and it's retreating back and back. Pretty soon it's just a little crack in the side of the mountain. Without that glacial water, do our salmon know where they're going now? They're imprinting to that glacial water. We don't know. I mean, we have to bank on the fact that we have a good snowpack. Then that creates a springtime events, the high water events that send the smolts out to sea. A lot of unknowns, things that we have to adapt to. So that carries over to that question in the ocean, like Billy was. He said one day at the Northwest Indian Fish Commission. I was just reviewing the film the other day, and as he said, he got a call from Quinault. That was us, and he said there was miles of fish dead on the shore, and there was. And he came down, him and Mike came down, and we took some pictures, and all kinds of fish that are like from the bottom of the water column, and they call it hypoxia. No more oxygen down in that lower water column, and if you can't escape, then you're going to expire. You're going to die. Eels, all kinds of different kind of rockfish, bottomfish, flatfish. Quite a trail of them, and that's when we really started to say, okay, what's going on, and looking at what other people are doing. Down in Oregon, they had been experiencing it previous, so I think it was Oregon State or Oregon. One of them was doing some studies. But we look at that hypoxia, and then we were thinking that it has to do with water temperature in the summer, and the current's not much current and no upwelling. But then the upwelling leads to the question that we get drawn into hypoxia under the carbon. The carbon releases acidification. So you got this carbon that trickles out of the atmosphere, goes into the water, and goes to the bottom of the ocean. Has been laying there, and because there is upwelling, that used to be we thought a good thing, because it turns the nutrients over and helps the zooplankton and phytoplankton and the other things that salmon eat, the cocopods and whether they start with a tree, tripopods or something like this. These are the food for the salmon. Well, it's releasing when it has that upwelling. It's releasing the carbon that's been sitting there in the bottom of the ocean and coming up and then going into the atmosphere, which is, the carbon is part of that greenhouse gases and the global warming question. So as I believe the guy that works for me, Joe Schumacher, said, our Gary Morishima said, our old friend turns into be an enemy, and that's the upwelling. So now you got this event that goes on out there. That upwellings used to be something that helped us and was valuable. Now it's part of the tool that releases this carbon. And this carbon is, as Dr. Feely has stated, is 50 to 60 years old. That's how old that carbon is. And so the carbon from the last 50 or 60 years is yet to be released, which it seems that that carbon is going to be heavier or more of it that's going to be released into the atmosphere. So for me, okay, I'm not the scientist, I'm not the biologist. I'm trying to weave through what they're telling us as policymakers. But the bottom line is we got a problem.
So, just want to first say you're listening to KAOS 89.3 FM here in Olympia. We're with Ed Johnstone from Quinault. And so I'm thinking as you're talking, and so the acidification that's happening with the carbon, it's heating up, it's heating the waters up.
Well, the carbon, I mean, what I know about it is how it's released is by these upwellings, when the currents and the winds and everything stir the stuff in the bottom and then releasing the carbon. Goes up through the water and then comes out into the air, which, as I stated, was always seemed to be a good thing because it helped the zooplankton, the phytoplankton, and all that.
Yeah.
So now we've got these events that look like they're turning against us, releasing the carbon into the air that exacerbates this greenhouse gas effect.
And it takes the oxygen away from
Yes,
all
it can do
living
that
things.
too.
Yes.
It links up with hypoxia. We're told that they now can be linked together, and they're, we got scientists, we got people on our staff, like Joe Schumacher, who is working with our staff and our fishermen. Wrote a grant, was successful, and now we're going to collect data out on the coast using instruments that we're going to sink, I believe through crab gear, and working with our fishermen. And so we're going to try to get into the science part of this and see how we can get involved and hopefully go towards a resolve. But there's so much uncertainty out there because of things that the scientists are bringing to us as events that are, in their opinion, going to happen, like methane seeps. There's lots of methane seeps out there that are active, but they say that if the water temperature starts to continue to move higher, those seeps become more active, and so greenhouse gases. Same thing in the tundra up north. The tundra, the peat that has captured that carbon, has been frozen, thawed out, releases. So we better get this thing figured out, and we worry about that 7 generations. Does big business, does big oil, does big anything really think like we do 7 generations out? Because I'm worried about my great grandchildren. They're not even thinking about their children, evidenced by what they're willing to get behind and support.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's going faster than any of us could to stop. And so that's one of the things that, again, going back to Billy, always for many of us, we have to keep talking and keep telling the truth, and we have to work together. We have to work together if we want anything here. I think of all. I cry every time I see log trucks. They're taking the trees out and the natural buffers on the coast and things like that. And so we as people, we know. I want to believe. I want that we know better. That we need to start listening and coming back to one of the things that I wanted you to talk a little bit about, the treaties. The treaties guarantee, reserve the right.
That's correct.
That all this will be here, And so it's a law. It's a treaty law. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because some of our listeners might be just moving into Washington.
Well, as we often talked about it with Billy, he was real good at calling that out, that if you don't have a fish, you don't have a treaty right. And in particular in Puget Sound, that's the direction, and that is no fish, no treaty right. I mean, when we talk about all the issues that get tied to, pretty much get tied to the growth and expansion of the state of Washington, which the brunt of it gets taken up in, the greater Puget Sound region. The questions become more concerning and larger. That's why when I started this, I talked about we're being outpaced. At one of the meetings when we were recently discussing shorelines, and that habitat in Puget Sound, tribes and the cities, counties, individuals, people getting together and doing projects. We're restoring about 0.2 of a mile a year in Puget Sound. The destruction of Puget Sound is at a pace of about a mile a year.
Yeah.
So we get an 80% net loss every year, and we're trying to stop those kinds of activity where that shoreline, that near shore habitat that are critical for these Chinook and coho, where they get in those little marshy areas or gravelly areas or along the shore as they're trying to escape predation, as they're trying to make it through their route to migration.
Yeah, and it's like you said earlier, it's happening here, but it go up the river, it go down the river. It eventually will come into the communities, both north and south.
You mentioned about how you feel when you see the log trucks. Well, I understand that, but it is an industry. It is here, and the tribes and the industry got together and in the last 25 or 30 years. Originally, they were in Chelan, and they got together, and it was the Chelan Accord, and then later, and I was involved in it, was Fish and Wildlife, and then Fish and Forest, and reached some agreements about what the near stream side should look like, the riparian zone, how many trees, and how far away, for all of those things that would provide for good habitat. And was it perfect? No, but it was an effort that we came together and we made some agreements, and it's being implemented. But you can't get others to the table to talk about the riparian buffers and water quality, water quantity that's needed for fish. And ag has been very slow to come to the table. If you could get ag to the table, you'd start to make more of a difference. And then the way that the growth is handled by the cities and the counties has to be, we have to think about that, because when you continue to build up the landscape, start to go up the sides of the hills, you're talking about no ability for the land to absorb. They call that the duff is not there anymore. And so now you got asphalt and concrete, which is, now you want to talk about that stormwater runoff and how that's handled. It can be done. It's expensive. Tribes are doing it. The Squaxin Island tribe has done it. Suquamish has done it. Tulalip has done it. They're doing 3 and 4 and 5 times the national average in dollars to put in these systems that return that water to those systems clean.
Yeah. So what happens? I'm seeing your T-shirt there, the Bolt 40, and I remember going back to Billy, how he was talking about like back in those days, Weyerhaeuser, the tribes knew who to talk to.
Absolutely, that's a good point. He would tell us, and I knew, because I know that Joe Delacruz and Guy McMines for Quinault were able to talk to Weyerhaeuser and ITT Rainier, which are big players out on the coast. And that's Billy's point, was when we had issues, we know who to talk to. We could make a call and we could sit with the presidents of those companies. Not anymore. We don't know how to get to the top level folks in these companies to talk about some of those agreements.
Right, and that's why we're seeing more of the destruction that you're talking about, taking more, and because we don't know who to go to.
The destruction is in the relationships, and I think that Billy was trying to make that very clear. Now, having said that, the fish and forest that we did here in the last, I think, 15 years, we've stayed connected to the industry, and I think Billy used that as an example of being able to talk to these CEOs or the chairman of the boards or the boards, whereas we don't seem to be able to find our way in to talk to, like Boeing and some of the other companies that are kind of in the question of the day, for instance, with the fish consumption rate and other related issues that are habitat related. The fish consumption rate, that's water quality. That issue is a water quality issue, and with the fish consumption rate so low at whatever it is, 6.75 grams here in the state of Washington, that means lots of pollution, and if you would adopt something like the Oregon's 175 grams, it means your water quality is going to get better and better and better. And so that's a debate that's out here, and that we're trying to work with the state of Washington and the government that has a responsibility. It's not only the Indians that eat fish and shellfish. It's a lot of people that eat it, and
it's
that
everyone.
puts everyone at risk, because and then it gets technical about the cancer rate and so on and so forth. But the more that you eat fish or shellfish from certain regions, the more you put yourself at risk.
Yeah, and so it leads me to a question of how do we become more informed to be better allies and to work together with tribes. How would I, other than I'm always talking about it, want to know more. I
think that you listened and you paid attention to what Billy said, and it's the same thing that we say when we work with our tribal councils, is we're always educating. We're always, because there's new governors, there's new representatives, State House, Senate House, there's new Congress, there's new senators, Congress. Educate. We do a lot of educating in Washington, D.C., not only to the congressional delegation, but to the agencies, the White House. I mean, that's where we went with our Treaty Rights at Risk white paper 3 years ago in July, was to the White House, CEQ, Center for Environmental Quality, with our concerns. And as you recognize, tied back to our treaties and our treaty rights, and tied back to the way we believe, and that's 7 generations, and tied back to what Billy would say in what he believes in. He believes in the air, the trees, the bugs, everything that crawls and swims. I'm paraphrasing him, but that's what he believes, and that's what he believed, and that's the fundamentals of what we're all about. When you talk about Mother Earth, when you talk about what those treaty signers thought about in that time was the retention of those rights.
Absolutely, and like Billy would always say, the measuring stick of the Pacific Northwest is the salmon, and if the salmon can't live, none of us can.
That's exactly what he would say.
It's that simple. And like the water, I don't know if they're making any headway with. I know he was talking about the salmon going out towards the Tacoma Narrow Bridge, and they get there and they don't make it.
Well, I would actually say they don't make it to the Narrows. Now, I believe that they're in kind of a discovery mode, and I know just the fringes. I hear some of the discussions that Nisqually and Squaxin Island and others are having about taking a look at that water quality that these smolts have to deal with as they come out of, for instance, out of the Nisqually River and they head towards the Narrows. Something's going on, and the numbers of out migrants and then the return that they get in, whatever species it is, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, is very concerning because they're not seeing the returns, but they're already looking at a way of assessing what they release in the Nisqually and what makes it over, like, to the Narrows. And I think Billy always used it's only like 10 or 12 miles, and they seem to be disappearing.
Yeah, and it brings us back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show with the railways. And they're going to come through there. It's already a polluted area, Tacoma, with all the stuff that they do on the port there.
Oh, yeah.
So that risk factor coming through, it's going to affect every single Washingtonian. Lots
of light and heavy industry there in Commencement Bay and other places, and some of these areas they don't have there's no industry there anymore. They closed down and moved out, but most of what they left is laying in the mud in those areas, and the last thing you want to do is turn it over and stir it up. Yeah. And so what's going on is some of that happening? Is some of that environmental I'm going to call it waste? I mean, is there some way that's turning over in an upwelling of some sort? Or has there been some dredge activity? I don't know, but all I know is in Grace Harbor, there are areas where they dump stuff that they know they don't want to get in there and turn it over. They just want it to sink away.
Wow, and we got about 10 more minutes, and it just brings me back to reading when Chief Joseph once said that, one day he called the people that coming here, he said, one day you'll lie in your own waste. And I just keep on thinking about the direction we're going if we don't pay attention to the tribes, and that we don't pay attention to the water and the air, and all the things that you mentioned. The eagle. I want my kids to see eagles. I want everyone's kids to see eagles, and the water, the health of the water that we drink. I'm really, really concerned of where we're headed, because I don't think that our officials are thinking 7 generations down, and that they're, like you said, for the short term. We're going to employ 29 employees in this area, but the risk is so big, and something will happen. You said that, and I know that to be true because I talk to Steve Robinson a lot too, and we talk about these issues. And I remember once, Ed, I was at the Centennial Accord about 10 years ago. About 10 years ago, one of my first times there, and I volunteer to go because I like to hear what's really going on, and I always listen to water. But I remember them talking about how if we don't do something in a few years, that the hospital beds, the amount of people coming into the hospital room because of cancer and because of the water intake, it's gonna double. And I've already seen that, because there's it keeps dumping, and to me it's like the state is just putting band-aids on things, and we can't allow that anymore for our future folks.
It's this is such a debatable question about climate-related issues, and I say this, and somebody comes on and says, "Oh no, it's that." And I mean, we've been watching this debate for a long time, and others have been aware of it for a lot longer, and have found that the best way to guide our national policy was to resist and cast dispersions or shadows and misdirection. But if you really look at the indigenous people, the place-based peoples all over the world, and go up to Alaska, and you can start in southeast Alaska, and you can end up on the North Slope and over towards Kotzebue and Nome, and then down into some of those coastal villages. It's happening. I mean, it's, when they talk about the Northwest Passage, this great Northwest Passage is going to be a viable route, that means because there's no ice. That means they can go through that route and cut off lots of time and lots of money. But you don't have that ice, you don't have that cooling effect, and all those things that ice supports. You got a problem when a chunk of ice breaks off of down off of Greenland, Iceland, the size of several states, and is floating around, it's going to melt. And my best advice to people is spend a little time and try to understand it, so you can get on one side or another of this debate. But the more and more you see, the more and more you're going to think, what the heck are we doing? Yeah. What are we doing? Are we really that in the moment that we don't care about life? Because the people that are much smarter than me, much more understanding of how the warming effect will impact this earth, the more we should be saying, fix it, and fix it now. Because is there a tipping point? I don't know. I don't want to find out. And so I think we got to start thinking about changing our ways and doing a little bit of recovery here, or I think we'll find out, and we're probably not going to like the answer.
Absolutely, and I think it's what you keep on saying. It's we have to educate ourselves and know what's really happening out there. And speaking of Billy, he did that show, Indian Country, and you can Google it and watch it, and you can see what's going on. I mean, he was up there, I think, maybe 2 years ago, and they talked about a lot of the same things that we've been talking about for this hour. And so it gives you a good idea from the people. Again, going back to what you were saying, those indigenous people that have been on, I can speak here from Northwest, they've been on these watersheds since time immemorial. They know what's going on. We need to listen, and we need to work together, or there's not going to be anything here.
Billy also got a call from the Pacific Island groups, and we met with them, and they were talking about different areas from Hawaii, the Hawaiian Island chains, the Chamoras, Guam, the Marianas, American Samoa, and they're telling some pretty concerning stories about the tsunamis that they've had, and then the storm surges, and the atolls they're not atolls anymore; they're underwater, and then the islands, the experiences around their islands that they're seeing with it's either the storm surges or sea level rise that is coming much quicker than anybody told them. Put out there that said, this is something to worry about. They're saying it's happening now in a similar way that it's happening in Alaska. They're experiencing out in the Pacific.
All right, and we just got a couple more minutes, Ed, and I wanted to say thanks for coming in and sharing with us this hour, and I hope that we can do this again. I think it's very informative, and I also know in my heart that it will, like, overall with the memorial of Billy's, that we all have to take that leap. It's up to us now to do the work.
Well, we got to carry on what he's taught us. We got to take that and expand it. Use what he gave us, embrace it, and take the next step. That's what he was telling us. You gotta take those steps. You gotta do the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing's hard to do.
Absolutely. And again, I want to thank you for coming in. And you're listening to KAOS 89.3 FM here in Olympia. I want to remind people that remembering the 47, honoring the earth, it's going to be happening on July 6th. There's a rally that's occurring. Let's see here. Protect Our Future at Quinault.org. You can email them for more information. There's also a Facebook page, QIN Defense. Just type that in. You could also contact Steve Robinson here. It's 360-951-2491. And they want folks to come, right, Ed?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and join in remembering. And I just want to remind folks also, again, that what Ed was saying, that it's not a matter of when it's or how, it's when, and it can happen here. And I for one don't want it to, and I want us to look deeper at this question and work together with everyone. So again, thanks, Ed.
No problem. Glad to be here.
All right, and so we're gonna play one more song on our way out here, and then G-Dub is in the house. This one is Remembered Song, and we'll be back with G-Dub. Thanks for listening.